All right. Hey, what's up, guys? I want to give some people a chance to get in the room here. We're doing a live with the legend, Frank Shamrock. The guy is obviously, a legend, but beyond that, he's a very important guy to me. He was very important in my own personal understanding of catch as catch can wrestling, how it applies to MMA. I was very, very fortunate that he listed me as one of his guys in his best-selling MMA for Dummies book. But so without any further ado, let me see if I can bring him in here. The legend, the man, the myth, all that. What's up, Frank?
How's it going, brother?
It's going super good. I am really, really excited to do this event with you. We've got, for people who don't know, we've got CatchCon, which is coming up in February in Vegas. We've got a great spot, 7 minutes off the strip. So literally 7 minutes from all the fun. But we're going to grind. It's 3 days. We've got Frank, the legend. We've got Pat Miletich. We've got Wade Chalice coming. 9 full coaches, 2 certifications. And the next day is going to be super excited. Sunday, Friday, Saturday at the camps. And then Sunday, we're doing under 80 kilo singles matches, over 80 kilo singles matches, and real tag team competitive pro wrestling pin or submit. Yeah, it's going to be a blast. $1,000 prize on the line for each one of those titles. So, so we're trying to incentivize good people to come out and really give a good show. Anyway, Frank, man, I remember 2005, I drove up from Santa Monica to San Jose when you had that gym, and training with you and just trying to absorb as much as I can when you had your certification program open. For people who may not know, because there's so many young cats that came in after Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah.
What's the nutshell of your path? I think a lot of people know about the rough, really brutal upbringing you had and how that pushed you to be an overachiever in MMA. Where did you cut your teeth? Where were your first matches? Was it Japan?
In Japan, yeah. Yeah, December 18th was my first match in Japan in the King of Pancrase tournament. 1994. Ooh, back in the day. Um,
30 years ago.
yeah, it's literally 30. We just passed the 30-year mark. I had got a little notification. I was like, oh man.
That King of, and that isn't that where you won the
Yep.
interim title?
No, I lost. I lost to oh my Suzuki. No,
Okay.
Yamada. I can't
Okay.
remember. I lost in the second round. I beat Boss Root in the first match. That was my debut match. To just 10 minutes of
Legendary. That
madness.
was such a great
Yeah,
match, too. My
yeah,
gosh.
yeah. And then and then I was in. Everyone loved me immediately after. But then I lost the next day. I think I fought Yamada because he kind of knew my knee was hurt. He went right after it. Um, but I spent my first 4 years fighting in Japan before I went. Before the sport came here and before it got popular here, it was still pretty much underground, and we were running from the commissions and pay-per-view people and trying to figure it all out. But yeah, I was there 22 years old holding the bag, starting the whole thing up, and it started in Japan. Yeah,
Uh,
Funaki and Suzuki were my first teachers. They were
yeah, I
very old.
remember. I
Yeah.
remember way back in the day because you have so many of those old instructionals too. Like you pumped out such great material way back in the day, and it's so funny. It all stands up so well because how
Yeah.
trendy leg locks and all this stuff that you guys were doing everything back in the day. I mean, I look at these big groups now, like the Danaher Death Squad, and they're
Mhm.
all like juiced up and in speedos, and I'm like, dude, sorry, Lions Den was there like 20 years before you guys.
Well,
Um,
the fundamentals of the human body haven't changed, and so yeah, the mechanics, everything still works. But yeah, I loved learning and teaching, and especially because I started in Japan. There was a language barrier, like it was all these different mechanics. So the goal was to try to simplify things and make them the most effective. And then I kind of got caught on that, and that became the basis to my whole study. And then I read Bruce Lee stuff, and I was like, oh man, there's a whole mindset for this. And so I just fell in love with the whole study, the development, and the fighting. And then I mean, we were front of the world in all the fighting. We were top of the food chain and the knowledge, at that time. So it was cool to be a young man in that moment.
what was the shock like? Here you are, blue collar, brutal growing up, like just like awful, all the foster homes and the jail and all that, just really, really rough coming onto the planet that way. And all of a sudden, dude, you're like fresh, like you're 20
Yeah.
some odd years old, 22, you're in Japan. I know that, I obviously know, and I'm sure most of the viewers know a lot of the stories of you coming in with Ken. But what I don't think a lot of people realize is all that stuff Ken learned in Japan from guys like Carl
Yeah.
Gotch, like the 500 squats. You
Yeah.
were always super fit. You were a bodybuilder. What was that like to go from like the non-fighter, thinking you were an athlete, thinking you were tough, to transition into actually getting into a king of pancrase and the level of conditioning? What was that shift? Like a body rest tends to stay at rest, a body motion stays in motion, but there's this energy increase to get up here. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was really blessed with the bodybuilding study. I had a lot of big muscles. I mean, I was in prison for 3.5 years, like blowing up these muscles and feeding them and understanding the biomechanics of how they worked. So I had really big, delicious muscles, but they just didn't have any stamina. They didn't have any repetitions in them and ability to, move the amount of times needed to move or otherwise to attack, defend, or win. So that's what I first learned. I mean, besides Ken, just whooping my ass on day one and me entering the lion's den and like figuring out all that, high level conditioning stuff. Once you start doing a couple hundred and you got some major conditioning, you pretty much do anything. And that's also a mindset in prison. Ironically enough, everyone that's serious about their seriousness is conditioning every day, lifting weights, working on something, doing something. So that mentality was very helpful. And yeah, man, it was brutal. But yeah, once you're in condition, once you're in shape, you can do anything, and numbers count.
Well, that first time you get done with the 500 squats and you realize you can't get up off the shitter or walk down the stairs, you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, that's
Yeah, it's
that's legit.
brutal.
I
Yeah.
I,
It's
uh, I really loved that interview that you did with Quentin Jackson.
oh yeah,
And
yeah.
one of the things I loved in that was this story that you had where you had to kind of, and I'm going to mess this up. I'm hoping you could correct me here and share it again, where you basically had to display like your don't fuck with me kind of situation in jail. Like, didn't you just
Yeah, yeah.
have to rock some dude, like, or a couple dudes?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, well, yeah. The funny thing about jail, which I took into fighting, which was being emulated by Ken, my brother, from his pro wrestling thing, was everybody's got a persona. They all got a thing, and in
Right.
prison, you just got to look as tough as humanly possible, so nobody bothers you because no one bothers the scary looking dudes.
Yeah, but
Nobody
what was
bothers.
that? Like, some guy was messing with you, and you like cleaned out like two or three guys, or what was that? What was the
Oh
story?
yeah, I got well. I'd like to think it was not my fault, but I did cream these. Um, it was a whole group of guys. They came in and tried to pressure me over the TV. They tried to
Yeah,
punk
changing the
me.
TV channel.
Yeah, they tried to punk me, and I was still, it was medium security, so it wasn't high. But you don't do that stuff. You don't threaten people. You don't try to punk them. Everyone's trying to walk around being tough. So if you submit to any of that, oops, then everyone else thinks there's an opportunity. Yeah. So they came in, changed the channel. I sat there and I was like, oh man. And then, yeah, I went in the back and got the mop ringers and I got the cleaner. I smashed these dudes, but I mean, they got some good shots in, and I mean, it was like 7 or 8 guys. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really have technique back then, but back then I was strong. I was lifting weights every day. My mental mindset was I got to get out. I got to build myself. I had mentorship. I had training. I had my team. I had a team at every prison. I was leading the weightlifting training. Um, but it was mindset. And so, unfortunately, when those things collide, I was ready to fight. And, sometimes you got to fight. That's why, that's why these techniques are so important. And the discipline in learning and the community and the trust and the friendships. And that's why I'm really looking forward to coming out because I don't think I don't teach. I haven't taught for years. It's
You
been
know,
what,
I've told
like a
everybody, I'm like,
decade?
dude, you
I don't
guys
even
got to
know.
get to this,
Yes.
dude, because this is
Yeah.
rare, man.
Yeah, and I've been preparing for a while. It's I started doing this the boxing in the park, and I
I saw
realized I
that.
can't twist that much. Absolutely not happening with my broken spine.
You're back.
And
Yeah.
so so I've been doing some restructuring muscular stuff, and part of that training is I've literally been walking around in Crocs for the past 4 months.
Wow.
And
Wow.
everyone's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, if I'm going to stand on an uneven, soft, squishy surface, I got to train my body for that. Otherwise, I'm not going to, my spine will literally give out because it's not. I got a broken spine. I can't, handle any instability."
Well, it's one of those things that, like I've really tried to go to the source of like the really, that's my whole company's called Number One. And I'm trying to I always try to go to the very best I can to model and figure out, it's cheating. I'm like taking a shortcut and taking what you've learned and trying to not make the same mistakes and whatnot. And I think that, one of the biggest tragedies of all this dumb political crap that goes on with like the UFC and all that is that, and what I'm trying to do in my small way is bring you to a larger platform because, everybody knows this that has been around. You were the prototype.
Oh
You
yeah,
were the prototype
I'm a
of
super
what we see
nerd.
today. So, so I think there's so much like when I came and learned with you, to get to through your training course and your certification, your coaching program. I was just so impressed with one, the way you approached mindset, two, the way you really approached the physical training, but it was all real holistic. It was very integrated into a really coherent system. And I'll always remember kind of this like training flow system
The
that where
flow.
it, where it was like you go from head and arm to cross body to north south, and I worked that through with you and then I took that and I had Billy Robinson tweak it and I had
Hmm.
Wade Childs tweak it and stuff. And so man, I just wish people realized like what a huge influence you are. But yeah, if guys, seriously, figure it out. Get in the fucking room. This is
Get
rare.
there.
And I'm telling you, like, this is one of the handpicked guys that I sacrificed for. I'm not asking you guys to do nothing that I didn't do. And Frank is like, you're going to be in the best hands possible, man. Just total legend and just super smart in his approach to everything. Frank, what was it like going from again, I'm just fascinated by this time period in your life of you're kind of on the shitter side of society. You're like you're in prison. You're having a hard time, and then all of a sudden, like you're a mega superstar, like rock star. Like, how did you manage that,
Yeah.
dude? I couldn't do that because I would be dead. I would make
Well,
so many mistakes.
yeah,
With the
yeah.
fame and all that. Like, what was that like as a young man?
Well, it was helpful that it was compartmentalized to Japan. And so in Japan, I was a rock star. Literally, I was,
Yeah,
and then you come back and it's like, yeah, I think, it was just like, you're just like a regular person because the sport was so
right.
small. And then even as the sport grew, the numbers were just really not there. I mean, I got more recognition from fighting Walker, Texas, Chuck Norris on Walker, Texas Ranger than my 16 years of fighting. I still got old ladies stop me in the airport. Ah, they yell at me. So
Wow.
it's just the numbers at the time just weren't big enough for me, and when I was doing my thing, and then I got older. But so that was a blessing because it's volume and otherwise. But I've learned to survive, and a lot of it is like you said, modeling behavior, finding mentors, like figuring out how to make the right decisions. I was super blessed to have an older brother and Maurice Smith, people my senior who had great knowledge and championships who were being presented with fame and got to see their results before I committed to my own, which
So,
was
so
very helpful.
well, one of the reasons I sought you out, I clearly knew who you were. For me, UFC Japan was like a real pivotal moment actually in my life. I was at UFC 2 in Denver and saw your brother,
Mm.
and that was huge. And then UFC Japan '97 just absolutely just changed because the jujitsu was trendy, and I was an outsider. I had no connections, but I saw the writing on the wall. What you did, I think Couture crushed it there, and then obviously Sakuraba, and all of these being wrestling based, and particularly you and Sakuraba being catch wrestling kind of based, that
Mhm.
Japanese submission wrestling, pro wrestling, Karl Gotch stuff. I've always been fascinated by your time in Japan, and I remember the final linchpin where I was like, screw this, I'm driving to San Jose, doing this freaking commute. Like, I don't give a shit because I need to do this. You on the back end of one of your instructionals. I can't. You had so many different companies you did instructionals with back in the day, but one of them it was like an outtake, and you said, "I learned my submissions from Minoru Suzuki."
Yeah, most of them.
So
Yeah.
I know that clearly you spent time with the Lions Den. Ken was formative in introducing you in early training, but then how did that? What was the training like with Pancras, and how did you get time with Suzuki? Any of these guys?
Yeah.
You mentioned I think Yamada and all these other dudes. Like, How did that go down?
Well, it's super simple. I just moved to Japan and moved into the dojo.
So was
Yeah.
it like the typical thing where you were the young boy and you got to mop
Yeah.
and clean and all that, and then you go
Yeah.
get beat up by all the
I
older
was a
guys?
little bit higher because I was a foreigner and I was Ken's, brother, and so I had higher respect level and expectations. But other than that, I was a young boy, cleaning, doing all the stuff. And I lived in the dojo. But that's how I got, presented, as they would come in and beat us up and then teach us stuff. Because that's the old way. You take a beat and get a good workout, and then they teach you a little something. But the stuff they taught me was so simple and so fundamental. And then, I think because Ken was more of like tough, thing. He was tough, he was strong, he was big, and I wasn't. I mean, I was muscular, but I didn't have real strength, like natural strength. So I felt like I needed to figure out the technical side, and their mechanics were so simple. And then we had language barrier, which made it even. Everyone had to get real simple. So the things that were might have been more complicated to absorb got really simple. And then I'm a nerd and write everything down and draw angles and create theories and talk to people about it and ask people to borrow their arms. And I keep the study going constantly until we all can figure out a solution. And so they were into that too. Like they were like, yeah, remember, we can't figure it out without language. We're just gonna figure it out. And then they would beat me up. But
So
they
so
both had good English too, which was super helpful. They could communicate.
yeah, I
Yeah.
remember like I sent that video when I went out. Suzuki and I go out to lunch every time he's in Denver, so I sent you that video. And I think a lot of people also forget that really killer match that you did. I loved it. It's one of my favorites because it was you and Sakuraba too. I think that was like in what was that 2017 or something?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the last time I did perform. Yeah, Sakuraba.
Yeah, that was great. And you
That
both you
was
guys
tough,
drew.
man.
You went
Yeah.
you went Broadway. It was awesome.
We danced it out.
Yeah, that was awesome. So coming up on this event that we have, CatchCon, you had mentioned that you're doing the boxing in the park, and you're living in Carlsbad now. I love Carlsbad,
Yeah,
isn't that right?
yeah. Carlsbad, North County, San Diego.
Yeah, it's like seriously like the
So
best
good.
place on the planet. Honestly,
Yeah,
like
it might be what it might be the best place on the planet.
it is, dude. How do you beat that weather? How do you beat the location? It's so chill. It's kind of still got that small town vibe, but you can go to San Diego or LA. It's like that's
Yeah,
killer. So one of the things that people don't realize is, like you mentioned, like you're a nerd, but maybe a better way to say that is that you are a bit of an intellectual. You do take a various serious approach, like you did to the physical problems, with you do like you do with psychological, and you've done a lot of work with kind of like Google level executives up
yeah,
in Northern California. Like, tell people a little bit because, and you also have like the Shamrock way, which is something I really love too. Maybe you could tell
yeah,
people just a little bit about your stuff that you did after the fight game that people might not even know.
yeah, for sure. Well, in the tail end of my career, which was the last 5 years, I started Strike Force, and so I became a promoter as well as I think I was spokesman for that brand and maybe some other strategist. So I just kept developing my business education because I went to college in prison. Like I didn't get a real life education in that way, and then I was all messed up as a child, so I learned the basics. Um, but when I got money and I got fame and I got a family, I really didn't know what to do with it, and so I took a mentor, and we created a whole business development. He taught me about product life cycles. Like he taught me all about business. And he'd been 30 years in business and in engineering. And so he had this very mechanical approach, which matched my nerdy mechanical approach. And I just kept my knowledge going. And so I, did speaking for, I did broadcasting. I did
Yeah.
broadcasting for Showtime. Yeah, yeah. And then, I've been in the Screen Actors Guild for, I don't know, 20 something years. But then I did public speaking, and that was really fun. Corporate leadership, it sort of was the byproduct of that. I got a call from Google one day, and they're like, "Hey, we got this super, experienced, high-level team, and we're not making the goals. It's not working. They're like, we need some help." I'm like, "Oh, and I remember
Did
selling.
you make them do Hindu squats?
No, but here's what I had them do. They told me the outline, and here's what 20-year plus experience. Run their own things, da da da. But they're not getting it together. And I go, oh, we need something to bring this team together. And I go, he goes, Mr. Shamrock, what are you going to do different that's going to bring this team together? And I go, Mr. Singh, bare knuckle boxing. He just pauses and he goes,
Wow.
seriously? I go, bro. I go, you haven't get a day of bare knuckle boxing, and this program I'm going to write for you guys, and this team will crush it. And he's like, all right. So I flew to Hong Kong, wrote the program, and ended up teaching it for a couple of years. Yeah, it was super fun because all these people from different worlds, and then they all got to come together and work together under this high, stress, like structured umbrella thing from someone else's, culture and ideas. And I get to just swing in there and be like, "What's going on? Who's this? What's that?" And then try to bring everyone together. So that has been really, really fun. Um, and then I still do a lot of charity work with our Shamrock Way organization. And we do at-risk people, at-risk communities. And so that's been for us our women's self-defense program. And then we do incarcerated youth because I spent so many years incarcerated.
Yeah, well, it's they're really lucky to have somebody like you to just be like, "Hey, I'm just like you, but I'm not like you because look what I did
Yeah.
afterwards."
Well, that's what happened is I was, when I was trying to launch my speaking, and I was like, "Ooh, it's terrifying and I'm not good at it and I'm uncomfortable." And I wouldn't, where would I be most comfortable and where is that need? And I remember sitting in those chairs, man, and it's the dorkiest, like medically educated people, and they're like, and you just go, oh, and you're just trying to pass notes and sneak cigarettes, and you completely, you know, nobody sits in those chairs and then gets on the other side, is what I realized. So when I went back, I was like, maybe I can help, and maybe this will help me. And so, yeah, I still do it, still go. It's fascinating because now it's 40. I don't know how long ago I was locked up. It was a long time.
Yeah, yeah,
I got out in 94, so what's it been 30? Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
30 years, and that was it. So now you got out the same year that you did the King of Pancrase
Yeah.
first tournament.
Yeah, I got out April 5th of 1994, and then I flew to Japan in September. I think September, late September, October, November fight. Yeah.
Dude,
It was terrifying.
baptism
Yeah,
by
I went from
fire.
Folsom. I went from Folsom to to Japan.
Wow, that is wild. Now I got a couple guys on the live here. You know, everybody's like super stoked. They said, Frank the Legend, all this kind of great stuff. One of the guys is asking if you could tell a story or two about AKA, about the American kickboxing, like the early days. Like, what was that like when you rolled in there? And
Yeah, yeah. When I rolled in, it was a bunch of kickboxers, boxers, and so I had met Javier at maybe UFC 5 or 6 or something. I just met him randomly. He was a nice guy, and we talked it up. And then he said, "Oh, I'm in San Jose. If you ever come to San Jose, you can come train at my gym." And I went, "Oh, that's what I do." And so I don't know, maybe a year later, I meet this girl in Hawaii who becomes my second wife, Angelina, and she lived in the Bay Area. So I ended up coming out here and hanging out with her and this and that. And I called up Javier, and he's like, "Yeah, come on in and train," and then nobody trained at noon, and that was like, "Hey, well, why don't I just I'll come in, I'll train by myself at noon. I got all these drills, I got all these theories, I got this whole program. I'm gonna conquer the world, and I'm happy to share it. Just I need some space at noon." And he's like, "Yeah, no one's here. Come on in." And so, yep, started with me and the program, and then yeah, And then it just kept developing until I think I moved to Hollywood in maybe 2000 and maybe 2000, I can't remember. But I taught there and launched the program and got everybody in line and yeah, it was a perfect experimental place because I had an extreme amount of knowledge from Japan and from all from these different locations, and then
And
these guys
nobody had
did.
seen that stuff before
Yeah,
over
no one.
here.
These guys, like, no one had seen anything, so they were
Yeah.
just like, "What are you doing?" Like, people would laugh at me. I would hear the kickboxers and the boxers laughing at me because I'd be doing drills and, and breathing, doing all and studying mechanics and I wonder about this theory, and they would just like, "What are you doing?" They would make fun of me. Um, but yeah, it just took a lot of thinking, and then it was great because these minds were fresh. So everyone who came in was like, "I'm into martial arts. I have no idea what you're talking about, but like, let's train." And so in that way, it was a great community of development because the Bay Area was all about martial arts. Even people at AKA were like, "Yeah, we've never. That's what." And teach us, like, let's do it, because that's interesting and new and different. And yeah,
Well, especially with like Bruce Lee really starting in the Bay Area.
yeah, that's why. Yeah, I mean, San Jose's. I've been all over. That is the most martial artsy place I've ever been. Like everybody's into it. Everyone's like, oh yeah, and they know lineage. They know about structure. People want to train, and it's just a very different culture than I've seen in most cities. It was really welcoming. I mean, they took me in. They're like, come on in, knucklehead. And by the end, I was leading the arenas and doing. And it was all because of the martial arts community. It's like, hey man, martial arts, we're in, like, that's cool. And let's see what happens.
Dude, that's so awesome, man. I'm just over the moon. And again, thank you so much. I mean, I really know that you're like doing this as a personal favor to me, and that means a lot for you to come out to CatchCon and give these guys a little bit of a taste of what I was able to get when I was, 20 years ago or whenever 2006 shit.
So
That's 20 years ago now,
it's
almost
20
like
years ago, bro. Oh my God, we're
crazy.
so old. I
It's
love it.
ridiculous, dude. My
Yeah.
daughter's turning 18. I'm like, what the hell is going on? It just,
Yeah.
I don't feel old, but I'm old, I guess. So,
Just keeps marching on. Just keep training, studying, keep the mind sharp.
so,
All
so
will be well.
So for the guys that are coming in, not only for the camp with you and everybody else that's coming to CatchCon, not only for the training camp part, but also because we're holding these catch wrestling rules, pin or submit tournaments the next day. Any word of advice, anything you would tell these cats to do to be prepared for this crazy fun event that we're going to be doing in Las Vegas in February?
Make sure you're training. Drink lots of water. Make sure you have a ticket. And always brush your teeth before you go out. A la Suzuki Minoru. when, when I first saw him brushing his teeth, I was like, what on earth? What is he doing? And he's like, I breathe better. And I went, wow, this is like old school knowledge. But yeah. No, and if you're gonna compete, relax, have fun. Like it's the goal is to flow. The goal is to find that movement of your body where it can become, what it needs to be, when it needs to be, for what it needs to happen. And if you're
So,
trying to win,
one last question. I do appreciate all the time. This was totally like impromptu. I literally texted you like an hour ago. You're like,
yeah,
"Oh
it's
yeah,
all
give me an
good.
hour."
I was going to the dog store with my dog, so it's fine.
So one last question. One of the things again that you've had to master and then actually ran into the battle. What I think you've had to really master your mind in terms of
Yeah.
anxiety, trauma, being put in scary situations, like in all kinds of contexts, from when you're a child to jail to going to Japan to going to UFC to going movies to going and teaching Google executives. You've always had to put your. What do you recommend for these guys that Listen, let's just be real. Like, like I hate to even bring this up, but like we know that the testosterone rates have absolutely plummeted in the last 30 years. And testosterone is kind of a risk-taking hormone. How did you get to be like, oh, everything is going to be okay, even though you went into these wild, for me, would be anxiety-inducing situations so often?
Yeah.
What did you really, how did you get your mind dialed in that? Was it just pure inoculation because of exposure, or was there something you learned that allowed you to handle such situations?
I think I got good at it. You know what I mean? And then, because most of these situations, which, there's presented upon me, the fighting, I
Yeah,
was like, yeah, I'll
right.
do that. And the prison, I was like, I don't want to do
Yeah,
that.
and the abusive childhood and all that
Right.
shit
Like, I
that
don't want
wasn't
to,
on the.
but the other stuff, I was like, yay, let's go do that. So, I think when something's forced upon you, or when you don't want to do it, maybe it's a little different. And it creates maybe a bigger necessity. But yeah, your mind is a supercomputer. You can program it any way you want. This is what I found out now. This is why you shouldn't punch said mind, because it's just not
Yeah,
good for the super. You wouldn't drop your iPhone. Don't be getting punched in the head. It doesn't make any
that's
sense.
so like, would you say that some of that early trauma actually benefited you in these the later part of your
Yeah.
life and the wild stuff you were able to do?
Well, I wouldn't say in the later part of my life, because now that I'm 52, your body remembers trauma. Your body remembers
Mm,
injuries. Your body remembers emotional, like deep emotional things that affected you. Your body remembers that stuff. And so when you do a whole bunch of those things, your body gets jacked up. And so I have to try to keep calm and carry on so I don't stress myself out because my knee will hurt, my back will hurt,
mm,
the other knee will hurt. I'm like, wow, that hasn't hurt in 3 days. But it's just a stress that's been placed upon me through all the stuff that I've done. But you can mitigate that stuff, and that's what I learned when I was younger. Or otherwise, I think I'd be really crippled now. And that was through the meditation and the visualization. And people always forget all this. Write it down, draw it out. Like
yeah,
if you
that was
can't
what
show me a
I always
picture
loved
of
about
it,
you. You had
yeah, if
everything.
you can't show
Your
me a picture
notebooks
of
were
it, I'm gonna
thick.
be like, what? Like it's got to be so simple for you, for everybody. It's super simple, and that's one of the biggest things that came out of that Warriors Code that we did for Google was the plus equal minus system, was creating real simple symbols where people go, oh yeah, that's what I need. And when you have your plus, someone giving you the information, coming to an event, having a teacher, you fill it up and you grow and you know what's going to happen. So it dampens down that anxiety and that fear and that stress and those, you know, when you're fighting for your life, it's way stressful. When you're in prison and you're like, gotta do that walk, that's way stressful. Normal stuff is not that bad, and you get used to it a lot
Right,
quicker
right.
when you have tools in place. And plus minus equals, get yourself an equal, find a guy, hey, well, you're doing the same thing, let's go in the park and talk about this, try to figure it out, like build the system of support so you're not going, oh man, you know is it really going to work?
Right,
That was
right.
the hardest thing in the beginning, is I was the only, they were all my ideas, there was no scientific proof. So I was like, well, team, here's the data, here's the reality of the situation, but let's go try it. And then boom, hey guys, here's our result. And that, I think, is a mindset will help you get through most things. Having just a logical, relaxed mindset. Oh, we got to deal with this. Everything is a mechanic. Everything is a technique. And when it's good, then everything's a flow. And that's what we're looking for, is the flow.
I'm really excited to have all these guys, watch them just sponge all the crazy stuff that you're bringing to CatchCon in February.
Yeah. And
Last
do we
thing, I
need,
know I said my
so
last question was the last
no,
one,
no,
but
you're cool. Do we need, I have no data of what is needed. So if there is needs and people want to learn something, I'll write a
oh,
course like I
brilliant!
wrote for Google, like I wrote for the police department, like I wrote for all these other groups, including myself. First program, Shamrock MMA. How do we figure out fighting so we don't end up crippled, brain dead, and dead?
Guys, and so take advantage of that, guys. He's actually like DM me
Yeah,
or DM
let's
Frank,
get the knowledge
whatever.
that we're looking for, because mine's full of just endless. I studied for 20 years.
At the
But what do we
highest levels of
need?
the game. At the highest
Yeah.
levels of the game, uh, I promise this will be the last. I'll give you another comment, but dude, I remember I remember back in the day, and I don't know if you still hold them or not, but for like 20 years, you held all these world records, like
Mhm.
fastest submission, fastest not. What were some of those world records you held, like Guinness World Records?
Yeah, the first one was the Kevin Jackson 14 seconds, which was the fastest submission in the
Faster.
UFC. And then I had the fastest knockout at 20 seconds for Igor Zinoviev. And then that got broke not too long after. Yeah, they had a bunch of them. And this is how long ago it was. I submitted my own records. And they sent him back and said, "Yeah, that's not a sport yet. Like, what? We don't have any of those." And so,
Wow.
literally, and they're like, "This category doesn't exist." And then I wrote them again. I was like, "Well, the sport's happening," and so they moved forward with categories years later. But when I first sent it, they're like, "Yeah, it doesn't exist." I go, "Where's the videotape? What are you talking about?"
Dude,
But the categories hadn't been thought of yet because no one had gotten that far.
the legend is not just a gimmick, dude. It's like the truth, man. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts.
Awesome, dude. Well, listen, guys, take advantage of this exceptionally rare opportunity. He's truly doing this as like a favor to me. I texted him randomly. He's like, "Yeah, dude, you're the only guy I do it for." I'm like, "Oh my god, dude, this
Well,
is
you
really
didn't know I've been training for 5.5, 6 months for this.
okay." Well, yeah, I know that you're back. Dude, you've been through the ringer, dude. Like, I can't even imagine. So I'm glad to hear that you're that you always got Crocs going for you right now.
I get some crazy looks, but I can walk on mats. I can stand for hours, and people are like, "I thought you couldn't do that." I'm like, "Yep, that's what they told me."
Well, man, listen, I appreciate your time. I don't want to keep you on a Saturday, dude. This is just really an exciting time for all of us, and excited to see you in a couple months out in Vegas.
I'm looking forward to it, brother. Come on out. Let's get on the mat.